All right. Should be getting ready here in just a minute. Looks like YouTube is moving.
That's okay.
I know. I'm still waiting for other people to log in too. There we go. I'll put that to one side. And we will wait a few minutes, and that'll give me a chance to.
Gina coming soon because the baby eating now.
Ah, it's very nice.
Yeah.
Always good to have dinner with the kids.
Yeah, I know. She no play on the food.
No, that's good. That's good. Table manners are very important.
Yeah, she eating everything.
That's also good.
Yeah.
I tell people you want to make sure that you give your kids lots of different things to try when they're really, really little, and that will make them much less picky when they're older.
I give you the fish, I give you the salads, I give you the soup, everything. She eating everything. Ice cream, she like ice cream.
Well, of course, everybody likes sugar, but
but she like the natural juice.
Right, nice.
Different fruits. Gina give you the natural fruits. She love it.
Very good.
What's the family? The family.
Oh, they're all doing very well, thank you.
Yeah, good.
Actually, they're having dinner right now too. I'll be having dinner after class.
Yeah. The problem is Israel now.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It is heartbreaking.
I watched the new wow.
Is that related to the Biden policies?
The current flare-up I don't think is related to the administration. If you were asking me my mostly uninformed but slightly informed opinion, I believe that the Palestinians, the West Bank Palestinians and the Gaza Palestinians were very unhappy that they couldn't come to an agreement about their election, and so they needed a scapegoat. And the current hot topic were the houses that were in the East Jerusalem district. And so they decided to focus a lot of attention on that. That plus Ramadan gave them an opportunity to draw attention to Al-Aqsa, to the Temple Mount, which of course almost demands more attention from the Arab world, especially during Ramadan. But then that is all West Bank focused, so Hamas has to join in as well, or else they run the risk of being ignored. And, God forbid they be ignored. So, yeah, unfortunately, this seems to have been much more about distracting them from their failed Palestinian elections and from their unwillingness to actually help the local population.
But they canceled the elections under Donald Trump too.
No, the elections were canceled just recently.
No, but under Donald Trump, I think they had them set around the same time as Israel's elections, and they canceled them back in, I think it was 2019, right?
That I cannot remember. I do not keep perfect track of all of the Palestinian elections. Well, expected elections, since they haven't had one in almost a decade or more, maybe. It's hard enough keeping track of Israel's elections. But they have definitely been feeling sidelined as more and more of the other Arab nations have been making normalized relations with Israel. That has been troubling to the Palestinians, and rightly so, because they know that they are losing the opportunity to make what would be a better deal for themselves and their people. But that unfortunately has been the very long arc of the story. But hopefully this flare-up will go down without any more loss of life, and there will be a chance for people to actually come up with a governance in both areas that represents the population, and then maybe they can actually have a reasonable conversation without rockets flying overhead. But that's the prayer.
I thought this put a big stopper on the normalizations that were forming.
Well, like I said, that is very much the baiting. But I have not heard from any of the other states, and maybe I missed it, that they are retracting the normalization. They are not drawing attention to it at the moment because they are worried about perceptions during this time. But
well, they came out against Israel, which is.
Well, I mean, that's like saying they came out and said the sun was hot. I mean, that's just boilerplate responses. The question is whether they change any of the things that have been agreed upon.
Right, but I mean, you're not very likely to institute trade, which was a big goal if you don't like people that much.
Of course you do. America comes out against, Chinese treatment of the Uyghurs or against human rights on other members of their population. We still do trade with their country. Posturing on issues is something that countries will do routinely with trade partners for domestic consumption without actually stopping their international agendas. That's why international relations are a lot more complicated than headlines.
Yeah, but we don't do trade with people like Russia.
What do you mean we don't do trade with Russia? We did trade with Russia when they were the Soviet Union. We were their primary grain exporter or importer to them.
Were we?
Yes.
I thought we had sanctions on them.
Well, there are sanctions and there are sanctions. So there were sanctions for certain things that we were not willing to trade with them. But it was usually agreed upon during the 70s and 80s that grain shipments to Russia provided more stability and prevented them from acting irrationally, meaning against U.S. interests in Europe or Asia. So yes, the U.S. was a major supplier of grain to the Soviet Union, and we still have trade with Russia. We have sanctions more on individuals in Russia than we do on the entire country.
Yeah, I feel like we'd have more trade with Russia if we got along with them.
Well, yes. If they weren't trying to undermine our democracy, that might make things a little bit easier. Agreed. All right. I think that's probably enough of current event reviews. Let's hope that by next Wednesday that there is no more terrible news, but things are beginning to or have quieted down, and maybe even, God willing, people are having meaningful discussions rather than lobbing rockets. But for now, we get to have our own meaningful discussion. This is Mishnah 3 of chapter 11 in Yevamot. And this was the one I thought we were just going to get to last week, but then we had a very good and an important digression. But that means we get to start off with something fun and something that will be important for setting a precedent for the other Mishnayot in this chapter. So it all works out. Again, like I have said for the last few weeks and pretty much many times before that, the following story should not be taken as something that is likely to have happened. It is certainly not something that would ever be recommended to happen. Instead, we are dealing with the most exceptional circumstance in order to highlight the essence of the issue at hand. You often will find the law clearest when you reach the border rather than when you are in the safe and boring area of obvious. So we move to the non-obvious, we move to the bizarre to find out what is most salient in the issue. So chapter 11, Mishnah 3. With regard to 5 women whose offspring were mixed, that is, their lineage became indeterminate, which is the nicest way to put it, and they had other sons as well who were not mixed. All right, so lineage becoming indeterminate, the commentators are a little bit blunter on this. This means that there are 5 women, and the children could be the sons of any of them. Now, the most likely but bad version of this would be that there were people fooling around, but since that would create mamzerim, which would make this a full different situation, instead, the nicer version of this is they all had 5 children, or rather they all had children, 5 of them together, and they put the children down for nap one day, and then they all rolled around, and when it came time to pick up the kids, nobody was sure which kid was theirs. So They each know that the kid has a brother because each of them do have other sons, but they don't know who is from which parent, which mother, which father, and they don't know, therefore, who is the actual brother of each of the 5 kids. Does everyone have that situation? You take 5 babies that all look alike, and come on, let's be honest, a lot of very young babies do all look alike. You mix them all up, you hand them back to the mothers. Now nobody knows which baby is which. But, and this is something I really do like in the situation, but the families are raising the kids. They're not saying, well, if I can't be sure this is my kid, I'm not going to bother taking care of it. They're saying, no, look, I'm not 100% sure that this is my son. It could be her son or his son or her son and the neighbors around the area. But I will treat this one as mine. I will raise this one as mine. When the time comes, I will treat this one as mine in all respects. However, when it comes to Yibum, when it comes to levirate marriage, hopefully you are beginning to anticipate the problem. If I know that this kid has a brother, because all of the other potential fathers have sons that are paired to one of these, then if there is a need for Yibum, for levirate marriage, how do we handle it? 5 sons, 5 kids, each with a brother, but they've all been spun up and mixed. Everyone got that? Okay. And the mixed sons matured and married women, as kids will do, and subsequently died. All right, again, we've got all 5 kids dying, all 5 young men now dying, and of course, all 5 of them leaving no heir, meaning all 5 of them now need Yibum. They now need levirate marriage. But how do we do that? We don't know who their actual brother is, but we do know there is an actual brother. That is our riddle. And here comes the solution. The 4 sons who were not mixed, meaning the 4 of the 5 other brothers, each one from a different mother, must perform a chalitza with one of the widows, as she might be the sister-in-law of any of them, right? So you have, sorry, I need to get my hands in camera view. You've got the 5 surviving brothers. 4 of them go to one of the widows, and they do chalitza with her. That means they are breaking their connection to her. Now, it's very possible, and very likely indeed, that one of those 4 is the real brother, that they were the actual person bound by levirate marriage to get married to her. But we don't know. There's no way to tell. It's impossible to be sure. Remember, no DNA tests happening back here. So 4 of them do chalitza, which leaves one son who has not done chalitza with her. So, and one son of the mother whose sons did not perform chalitza may perform levirate marriage with her instead of chalitza. Now, what's the logic for her to get married to one of them? Even if she is not his sister-in-law, once she has received chalitza from the others, she may marry any man. So that means that she is technically free. If one of the other 4 was her actual brother-in-law, she is now free to marry anyone because they all did chalitza. And if it turns out the one that was left over is her actual brother-in-law, then she is getting married to him perfectly fine and correct as well. Now, I should point out, it is possible for all of them to do chalitza for all of them and just wipe the slate clean and everyone go their separate way. But this is trying to be a little bit more interesting by saying, how could we get all of the widows married to one of the surviving brothers? So just, if that was your objection to this, yes, the rabbis could have said, everybody do chalitza, but that's not interesting. Instead, the 4 do chalitza, the one that remains does yibum. If that's the actual brother-in-law, perfect. If it's not the brother-in-law, it's okay. She's available to get married because the other 4 did chalitza. Everyone with the logic? Okay. And subsequently, he and 3 of the 4 other sons must perform a chalitza with one of the remaining widows. So now he plus 3 of the others go to the second widow and do chalitza for her, leaving another guy who now is not married to anyone. He can then perform levirate marriage. And when this process has been completed for all the widows, 4 chalitzot and a levirate marriage are found altogether for each and every widow. Each of them get 4 brothers to do chalitza, and each of them end up getting married to one of the brothers, which may or may not be the actual brother that they are supposed to get married to, but in this situation, because of the doubt, that is the best resolution that can be found.
That's an amazing exercise for probability.
Yes, if you were inclined to do math, working out what are the odds that they would actually end up with the right brother-in-laws, I think we would find out the odds are pretty low, that we are almost guaranteed that at least one of the matches, well, I guess if it's at least one, it would be at least 2. At least 2 of the matches are probably going to be incorrect. But for the rabbis, this is the best solution for that confused situation. We can't simply say ignore it because we know there is a brother. Because we know each of the 5 deceased have a brother, we know that at least one of them has the obligation and that the woman therefore also has the obligation of being bound to that other surviving brother. Since we can't tell who it is, we have one option, which is everybody do chalitza and then we're all done. But if we wanted to find a way for there to be a levirate marriage for all of them, we can, using a little logic and a little bit of creative round robin activity, we can find a solution for the situation. And Natan, if you want to work out the probability for us for next week, that'd be great. I know you've got nothing else to do at this time of the school year.
No, studying. Studying Torah every day.
It's a nice perk when the students are face down in the test.
Yeah.
Any other questions on number 3 before we go ahead?
Nice exercise for permutation, actually.
It'd be fun to see a computer algorithm written for that. But they didn't have algorithms 2,000 years ago. They only had sechel, their clever minds. All right. Number 4, which you're going to see, has a similar theme of where there is confusion of who is who. Excuse me. With regard to a woman whose offspring was mixed with the offspring of her daughter-in-law, and their lineage was consequently indeterminate. So now we have grandmother, and well, eventually we're going to have 2 kids. We're going to have one that is the son and one that is the grandson of the same woman. Everyone following that? Now, if you're thinking, who has kids at the same time that their kids are having kids, right? Who's having a baby when their son, in this case, is also having a baby? Well, in the ancient world, and really up until the modern world, this wasn't that rare. I will tell you from my own family history that we have very clear records of somebody who had their first child at 18 and whose son then had their first child at 18, meaning that the grandmother was 36. For a 36-year-old to have more children would be perfectly normal. Even in the ancient world, it may not have been very common for people to still be having children by then, or not as easily, but it still absolutely was possible. So for a woman to have a child and for her child to have a child in the same year is perfectly physically possible. Nowadays, most people wait longer to get married, making it much harder for that to happen, but it is still possible, just a bit less likely now. So we have woman with son and woman with grandson, but they're mixed up. So maybe the mother is now raising her grandson as her son, and maybe the daughter-in-law is raising the son as the grandson. We don't know. And the mixed sons matured and married women, and subsequently they died. All right. So now we're back to our situation like we were in number 3. The certain sons, meaning the ones that we are sure are the actual sons of the daughter-in-law, the other brothers to the one that we believe was hers, perform chalitza with the wives, but not levirate marriage. As with regard to each wife, it is uncertain whether she is his brother's wife, and therefore his Yevamot, and uncertain whether she is his father's brother's wife, what we would call the aunt, who is forbidden to him by the Torah from Leviticus. So we have a slight variation here from the last one, because they do chalitza, but they can't do yibum. They cannot do levirate marriage, because the brothers, well, presumed brothers that are from the daughter-in-law are either the brothers of the daughter-in-law's son, meaning the brothers of the grandson, or they are the brothers of their uncle. Or rather, sorry, they are not the brothers of their uncle. They would be the, what do they call the nephews? And therefore, they are not allowed to marry their aunt. So, to remove any doubt, the children from the daughter-in-law's lineage, the daughter-in-law's definite lineage, they do Yevamot for their brother. They do chalitza for their brother and do not do Yevamot. They do not do yibum because that may be their aunt. Does that work? Even with my mistaken slip of the tongue? Okay. However, the certain sons of the elder woman, the mother-in-law, the first woman whom we saw, those sons, that is to say, the actual, we're really sure these are her sons, they perform chalitza or levirate marriage. As with regard to each wife, it is uncertain whether she is his brother's wife, in which case levirate marriage is valid, or his brother's son's wife, his nephew's wife, his niece-in-law, in which case she is permitted to him after having performed chalitza with a son of the daughter-in-law. All right, so we see that the prohibitions do not always work exactly the same in 180 degrees. A nephew is not allowed to marry the aunt, but an uncle is allowed to marry the niece-in-law. So that gives the supposed brothers of the higher generation more leeway to marry the younger generation widows.
Rabbi,
Yes.
excuse me. If they did the levirate marriage, whose kid would it be?
It would be the one that it was presumed to be, whoever was being raised.
Right, but they didn't know who.
And that goes into Mishnah 3 as well.
Right, they didn't know who was whether or not it's just a regular marriage and he's permitted to him, or whether or not it's an actual levirate marriage because it's out.
Right, but since they are getting married as an act of yibum, even if it is only a optimistic yibum, because there's a chance that they're not, then it is treated as that. But you're right. That's the reconciliation of the doubt here, is to say we're not going to potentially marry people that are prohibited to each other, but if there is a possibility and they do get married through yibum, then we will treat it as yibum, even though we know there's a 50-50 chance that it's not technically.
Is there a general rule on this? Obviously, they try to err on the side against prohibition, I noticed.
Yes.
But they try to err on the side of allowing a mitzvah.
Well, so again, this is a hypothetical situation. I don't think that it comes up very often that children get mixed up, especially not from the same family or close group. Maybe in a modern industrial hospital, it could happen, but not so often. But instead, what they are trying to deal with is the hypothetical. If it did happen and somebody did want to go through with yibum, this is the way we would handle it, or prohibit it in the case of the younger generation marrying up. In practical terms, if this family came to me and said, Rabbi, what should we do? I would say to them, even if I lived back then, chalitza, right? Just dissolve the relationships And unless there is some very surprisingly extreme reason why you need to have the offspring done through levirate marriage, you've got other sons, you have other family members, just dissolve any potential relationship through chalitza and move on. But like I said, this section of Mishnayot is not about what would normally be done. It's about the extreme cases and trying to give us some little insights into the overall legal principles, even in the more bizarre settings, or perhaps because it's in the bizarre setting.
But Rabbi, isn't one of the reasons they come up with these hypotheticals like this is to clarify certain points of law?
Exactly. And it is to clarify it, even if it's never acted upon, because studying the law itself, even if there is no practical implication because it will never be acted upon, is very, very important. Plus, there is the other topic that we've mentioned a few times, which is to say, sometimes people jump the gun, meaning it is very possible that a rabbi in the ancient world would have a family show up having already made some of these decisions, already having said, oh, well, we went ahead and had, brother A marry wife B, and the rabbi has to untangle what has been done that was prohibited and what has been done that isn't prohibited. And untangling stuff like this is a nightmare. And I'm glad that we don't have this level of complicated relationships. We have different types of complicated relationships, but we don't have this type of complication in the modern world. But yeah, sometimes it's an extreme situation just to make sure you know how to handle if someone has gone ahead and jumped the gun. Okay. Right. If the sons of certain unflawed lineage were the ones who died, so now we're flipping the case. The two mixed up kids are still alive, but their brothers are the ones who died. So they are now the ones who are bound by the obligation to do chalitza or yibum. What happens in that situation? Then the mixed sons perform chalitza with the widows of the elder woman's sons, but not levirate marriage, as it is uncertain whether she is his brother's wife or his father's brother's wife. And as we saw in the first half, that would mean that they can't get married. So since they might be married to her or might be betrothed through yibum, they have to do chalitza to make sure that she can be released. One of their ceremony is meaningless, but we don't know which one. With the widows of the certain sons of the daughter-in-law, now we're dealing with the younger kids. One of the mixed sons performs chalitza in case she is his brother's wife, and the other one performs levirate marriage, as even if she is his brother's son's wife, she is permitted to him. Again, we can see that the younger generation could get married. Again, maybe not recommended, but it is possible after chalitza has been done with the other brother, because either that is her actual real legitimate brother-in-law, or she has just been freed by the real legitimate one, and he's marrying his niece-in-law, but that is technically permitted under Jewish law. Questions, comments? Everybody breathing a sigh of relief that you don't have this kind of family drama? This is why you keep your kids straight and know who is who. But if you haven't, well, here comes a little more. Another case of mixing up the kids. You'll probably begin to see some of the patterns, but we have a new twist. In the case of a priestess, so priestess is really not the great word, right? This is the daughter of a Kohen, what we would call a bat Kohen, and she is the daughter of a Kohen, and her offspring, meaning the child of a Kohen, was mixed with her maidservant's offspring. They may partake of truma, meaning that the truma is normally reserved only for the children / family of the Kohen, but it is also allowed for the servants of the family of the Kohen. So, as both a priest and the slave of the priest partake of a truma, since the child is either the child of the slave or the child of the daughter of the Kohen, no matter what, the kid has the right to eat from truma, no problem. And they receive one share of truma in the granary. So when they go to receive the tithing that is done, you might think that since either one of them could be the proper person to receive from the donation, that they should each receive a share. But the Mishnah is telling us that we know that only one of them is the actual person who deserves it. So each of them gets half, basically. That one share is then divided between the two of them. One of them gets it, but since we're not sure which one, they end up splitting it. Does that bit of logic make sense? Right? They can't get two shares because we know there is only one legitimate person. But we can't give them no shares because we know there is at least one legitimate person. But since we don't know which is which, they end up having to share that. I'll take it by your silence that the logic makes sense. And they may not become ritually impure with impurity imparted by a corpse, as each of them might be a priest. So new topic, the two boys, they have a death of a friend, but not an immediate family member. They are not allowed to go and be with the dead body because they might be a priest, each of them. So you can see that there is the stringency is applied to both of them. And they may not marry women, whether unflawed women who may not marry a slave or women unfit to marry into the priesthood. As with regards to each of them, it is uncertain whether he is a priest or a slave. So neither of the young men are able to get married because they may either be a Kohen and thus cannot marry anyone except for those permitted to the Kohanim, or they may be a slave, in which case they cannot marry people that would normally be permitted to the Kohanim, which means that there are 0 available women for either of them, since each of them is limited by the stringency of both of them. Okay? Okay.
And
I
this
got a question.
why
Okay.
this slave can't marry any Jew?
What's that?
What's the problem with the slave? Why the slave can't marry?
He can't marry a free woman. That's one of the limitations on the Jewish slaves. They can't marry a free woman. So they can marry another slave, but if the other person was a slave, then they wouldn't be fit for the Kohen. Now we're going to
Rabbi.
fix that in the next sentence, but Aaron, question first.
Yeah, this kind of follows. This follows what I was talking about before, where they make sure the stringencies apply, but then they seem to relax the law to fulfill the mitzvahs.
Right. So, I mean, remember, first of all, the term mitzvah means both restriction and permission.
Positive mitzvahs.
Right. So they I think maybe a different way of stating what you're trying to say is the rabbis are being very careful to not transgress any of the commandments, meaning they're not allowing any prohibited action to take place, but they are also making sure that their due, what they are owed, what they do have a legitimate claim to, can be enjoyed as long as it doesn't trigger another prohibition. So yes, the prohibitions, the things that they are prevented from doing seem to come first, but then as long as it's not causing a prohibition, they are being given options for exercising the rights that one of them has, even though both of them will be partaking. Now, in part 2, we're going to change the situation a little bit.
Rabbi, aren't they required to fulfill certain requirements as well, not just enjoy the benefits?
Well, there aren't that many requirements that they can fulfill that are unique to each of them, meaning that they are not both treated as a slave and they are not both treated as able to be a Kohen. But it's important to understand, as we'll see from the second half here, that this is when they are children, that this is when they are pre-bar mitzvah age. Because once bar mitzvah age happens, they're going to change the situation.
I actually had another question about that. It might be a little off. How is it possible that children can be born into slavery because they'd be free by the time they're 7?
Well, no. So remember, when a person is a slave, well, first of all, the children can be born into slavery, but when they reach the time of release for sabbatical, they may go free. But if the slave chooses to stay, then they would stay with their family until the Jubilee. And then all of them would go free. So it is possible for a much longer period to pass.
Right, but it has to be optional.
Yes, it is optional, yes. But the situation can arise.
And if you, just out of curiosity, if you consent to being a slave past the year of 7, you're a slave forever. You can't revoke that status?
Until the Jubilee.
Until the Jubilee.
Correct. Or until you're redeemed by another way, or you're freed or liberated in a different way. There are other solutions, but the sabbatical release doesn't come. All right, so now the boys grow up a little. If the mixed sons matured and freed each other, all right, let's just make sure that we get this this beautiful picture of, since each of them may be the Kohen, who is technically the owner of the other, but we don't know which is which. Each one of them is basically obligated to free the other one because we don't know which is which. So one of them frees them, gives them their liberty, and the other frees the first one, gives him his liberty. So now we are sure that whoever was the slave is free. And whoever is the Kohen, well, we still don't know which one that is. But we have changed one half of the equation. It's now no longer slave and Kohen. Now it is Kohen and free person, but both of them are free. But we still don't know which one's the Kohen. So with that change to their identities, what changes in the rules? Well, now they may marry women fit to marry into the priesthood, as a free slave may marry such women, right? And of course, a priest could marry such a woman. So if they want to marry a woman who would be fine for marrying a Kohen, which is a large section of the population, they may do so. However, neither may marry a woman unfit for the priesthood because he might be the priest. And they may not become ritually impure with the impurity imparted by a corpse, since they are uncertain priests. So that part remains the same, that there is no change. However, if they do become impure, meaning if they violate that rule and they go ahead and become impure for the corpse they should not do, they do not receive the 40 lashes, the makot, the flogging, as each of them might not be priest, right? So they are not supposed to. It is considered a transgression, but we can't punish them because we might be punishing an innocent person. And since we would not want to punish an innocent person, we are opening ourselves up to the point where we know we might be failing to punish a guilty person. But since we cannot be sure which is which, we are not going to punish either. Following the logic so far?
So in those cases we go to the low common denominator.
And I mean, that's one way to put it. Yes. I mean, it's again, it's about avoiding transgressions. And so we are trying to get them to avoid transgressions, only marry women that both of you could marry, stay away from corpses because at least one of you must.
Sorry, can you repeat again from the beginning?
Sure. I said it's about trying to avoid any transgressions.
Yes.
right? Only marry women that both of you could marry, because at least one of you has a stricter limit. Stay away from corpses, because at least one of you is prohibited from doing so. But we're also avoiding the transgression of whipping a person that is not guilty of any violation. And so the community has a limitation as well. They can't punish them for an action that may be or is only violated by one of them, because we're not sure which is which. And again, we're going to see that same principle of avoid a transgression in the next sentence. And they may not partake of truma, as one of them is not a priest. So remember back at the beginning, let me just scroll that up just for a reminder, because we've gone a long way, that they are both allowed to have truma when they are young, because one of them is a servant and the other is an actual part of the Kohanic family, and both cases are allowed to have truma. But now, I just lost my place on the screen. But now, because one of them is free and the other is a Kohen, but we don't know which is which, at least one of them is not allowed to eat truma anymore. And since one of them is not allowed to eat truma anymore, then neither of them can eat truma anymore, because violating the limit on who can eat truma is an important mitzvah to be careful of. Did everybody see that, why that changed?
Rabbi, so which woman they have in common? If one cannot marry anyone that is free, and the Kohen is also very narrow, he cannot marry a slave. What they have in common?
No. So I think you're combining the when they're young and when they're older. Right? When they're young, they can't marry anyone, because either way they're prohibited to the other person. But when they're older and they have freed,
okay, yeah.
Right, when they freed each other, now any standard Jewish woman is basically permitted. And there are some exceptions, like divorcees and things like that. But the average woman that would have been married in the ancient world, at least, would have been permitted to both of them. Okay, and we did the truma. However, if they ate truma unwittingly, of course, right? They went ahead and ate it because someone served it to them. Maybe they didn't know the rules. Like we said, people mess up. They do not pay the principal and the additional fifth, as each of them might be a priest. So the penalty for eating truma when you're not actually a priest is to give the extra, to pay back what you ate, and to give a additional fifth 20% penalty payment on top of that. But since each of them might be a priest, we do not have the authority to obligate them to pay that fine, because they may very well have had the right to eat that truma, and for us to make them pay a fine is a form of theft. The court was very careful that it did not demand payment from somebody that it did not have the authority to demand payment from, because if the court takes money from somebody incorrectly, it is a form of stealing. It may be sanctioned by the Beit Din, but it is still an error and needs to be avoided. And they do not receive. Sorry, go ahead.
So they can only win and they can't lose.
So it's a mixed bag, as we're going to see from the rest of the list. It's a mixed bag because on the one hand, there are things they can do, like get married and avoid being whipped and such. On the other hand, there are things they can't do that we know that one or the other of them should be able to do. And trying to navigate this is very messed up. By the way, that's again why you make sure you keep track of your kid and don't let them get mixed up.
If not, call a social worker.
Okay, and they do not receive a share of truma in the granary, as neither can prove that he is a priest. However, they may sell the truma that they remove from their own produce, right? Because one of them is obligated to give truma, but from their own produce, they could take that truma, but then sell it, even though they can't actually eat it. But they are allowed to keep the money because there's a good chance the money is actually their right. And since eating the truma is different than using the money, this is where they are splitting the difference, right? Since it cannot be proven with regard to either of them that he is not a priest, truma cannot be appropriated from them. We can't force them to pay the truma. We can stop them from eating it, but we can't force them to pay it. And again, like we saw, we can't actually punish them if they violate that. It's still wrong. It is still an avera, a sin, but it is not something that is punishable by the court. And I can only imagine how much fun the court would have with trying to deal with these two guys. And they do not receive a share of the consecrated offerings of the temple, as each of them might not be a priest and thus is not allowed to get that share. And one may not give them consecrated offerings to sacrifice for the same reason. However, the hides of their own offerings may not be appropriated from their possession, right? You can't take it from them, as it cannot be proven with regard to either of them that he is not a priest. So in the usual sacrificial service, if a person brought an offering, the Kohen who did the sacrifice would get to keep the skin of the animal. That was part of the payment, if you will. But in this case, because one of them might be a priest, you can't take it from them. You can stop them from doing the service because they might not be a priest, but you can't take it from them just in case they are a priest. And they are exempt from giving a priest the foreleg and from giving him the jaw and from giving
Again, Rabbi, can you repeat the last idea? Sorry.
Sure. It's going to be the same idea for the next couple pieces. So yeah, I want to get it right. So because they might not be a priest, the prohibition on non-priests keeps them from offering a sacrifice. They're not allowed to do a sacrifice. However, because they might be a priest, you can't take from them something that is their property, meaning the hide of the animal, because you cannot, because it might actually be their property. So you can stop them from behaving like a priest, but you can't punish them from owning what a priest automatically owns.
So also the meat, they can take the meat for the sacrifice.
Well, so hold on, that's the next section.
Oh, okay.
That's why I said this theme, that idea is going to come into the next section.
No, because this is a connection with the Daf Yomi. That's why.
Yes, I know.
The point.
Yes, with Daf Yomi right now, it's in the section of Yoma, which is officially about Yom Kippur, but there's also a lot of discussion of the Kohanim, the priests in general. So, next section. And they are exempt from giving a priest the foreleg and from giving him the jaw and from giving him the maw of their own non-consecrated kosher animals. Those were the portions of the animal that when butchered were given to the priest. But since they might be the priest, they don't have to give them. You don't have the right to take it away from them. And with regard to either of them, the first thing of his kosher animals should graze until it becomes unfit, meaning to be sacrificed, that is to say, until it gets a blemish. Just reminder that the first of the animals were supposed to be sacrificed, offered, but in this case, we have another option. We let it continue to just grow and grow and grow until eventually, like all animals, it's going to get a blemish of some kind. Once that happens, well, it is against his interest to sacrifice the animal before it gets a blemish, thereby letting it be eaten by the priests. However, once it gets a blemish, it cannot be taken from him. Since he is possibly a priest, he may claim that the animal is the property of a priest. The animal then becomes private property, and he may eat it if he wishes. And in general, a general rule, we place upon him both the stringencies of priests and the stringencies of Israelites. So anything that is more stringent for being a priest, he is stuck with it. And anything that is more stringent for being an Israelite, he is stuck with that too. And that applies to both of the two men.
So both apply the stringency for both, for priests and for Israelites.
Exactly. And that's why you keep your kids straight. You want to make sure you know which is which.
And the animals, you say that after they become a blemish, they can eat the animal.
Exactly. Because no one has the right to take it away from them because it could be the animal of a priest. And you don't have the right to take it from them. But they're also not, they wouldn't be likely to want to sacrifice it beforehand because if they do, they're not allowed to enjoy it. All right. Yeah, we got almost 10 minutes. I'm pretty sure we can get through number 6 too. No problem. Famous last words, right? Mishnah 6. With regard to a woman who did not wait 3 months after separating from her husband and remarried and gave birth to a son, and it is not known if he was born after 9 months of pregnancy to the former husband or if he was born after 7 months to the latter husband. All right, so remember how I said that a lot of the halakha, a lot of the law is decided based around what people should do, and a lot of it's decided around what somebody went and did anyway. We already know from earlier texts that you're not supposed to get married if you don't wait 3 months. You got to wait that time to make sure that any baby you give birth to is the baby from the new husband and not from the previous husband. Remember, no pregnancy test, no ultrasound, no DNA test. This was to make sure that you knew the parentage. So what happens if she went ahead and did it anyway, and her husband went ahead and did that with her and got married despite her being a newly widowed person? And if she has sons of certain patrilineage from the first husband and sons of certain patrilineage from the second one, meaning that she's got other children from the first husband who died or who divorced her, and she has definite sons from the second husband, the one that she was married to too early. What happens when the son of uncertain patrilineage, the in-between son, married but died childless? Then the brothers from both husbands, that is to say the first husband and the second husband, they must perform chalitza with his wife as they might be paternal brothers, right? Because the brothers, the other sons from the first husband may be the brothers of this kid who was born 9 months from that first husband. Or the brothers from the second husband may be the brothers of this kid who was born early from the second husband. So each of them have an obligation, and all of them have to dissolve their obligation with chalitza. However, they may not perform levirate marriage with the widow, in case he is only their maternal half-brother. They don't actually share a father because there's a 50-50 chance kind of here. And his wife then is forbidden because you're not allowed to marry the wife of your brother except for the brother that came from the same father in the case of levirate marriage. And since there is just as good chance that this is actually the brother only through the mother, then we want to avoid the risk that you are marrying somebody that is forbidden to you. And since those people would be forbidden to all of the wives from either direction, we can't run through that, well, you do chalitza, you do chalitza, you do chalitza, and I do yibum thing. It doesn't work because each of them is uniquely prohibited from marrying their brother's wife, their maternal brother's wife. Everyone follow that logic?
Yes. So
All
you
right.
play safe, you don't take chances.
You play it safe and don't say chances, because if you get married, if we don't know who's who, then there is a real chance that we are just allowing a prohibited marriage. And similarly with regard to him and their wives, meaning if the middle brother is the one who lives and one of the other brothers from first husband or second husband dies, if one of them dies childless, he performs chalitza and not levirate marriage, because again, that could be his actual half-brother from his father, or it could be his half-brother from his mother. Either way, he can't risk it. Sorry, full brother from his father or half-brother from the mother. If he had half-brothers from the first brother, English gets hard at the end of the day. If he had half-brothers from the first husband and half-brothers from the second, not from the same mother, but from the same father, he performs chalitza or levirate marriage with their widows. Right? If he is indeed their paternal half-brother, then the widows are his Yevamot. If not, he may marry them like any other man. So just to make sure we got that clear, if
we say an expression in Spanish that maybe can help you, Rabbi.
Yes?
Fathers, we don't know. Mothers, is sure.
Right. So in this case, we're actually trying to imagine that we know the father from both sides, and he does actually have at least one brother that we are sure is from the same father in both directions, but we are sure also is not from the same mother. So each of the fathers had another wife, or even just one of them in this case, because it's only one marriage that we're talking about. Each of them had another wife that is not his actual mother, and that means that the wife of that other brother is either the wife of his father's son, which is his paternal brother, and that means levirate marriage is the appropriate response, or he has no connection to that kid at all. It's not from his mom and it's not from his father, in which case that's not his actual brother's wife, and he is free to marry her. So they do chalitza just to be sure, or can even do yibum, because if it's not yibum, it is marriage. And similarly, with regard to them and his wife, one half-brother from one father performs chalitza, and one from the other father performs levirate marriage. If we do have this case where they don't share a mother, there actually is a brother that is from the same father, but not from the same mother, then we can split the difference and have one do chalitza and one do yibum. If we want, of course, both could do chalitza as well. All right. Questions or comments? Because we're going to wrap it up there before we go on to another Kohen versus Israelite confusion. All right. Then we will finish it there. A reminder again to everyone to continue to follow the news and to provide your support for Israel in any tangible as well as spiritual way that you can. And we pray that she will become safer again in the short term, and that eventually we will be able to find a place for lasting peace and safety for all. But unfortunately, we still have to go through these incidents of violence for the time being, painful as they are. Take care, everyone.
Everyone there, today is the last class from the Rabbinical Assembly, now at 8.
Yes, sorry. The at 8 o'clock, the next scholar stream is starting.
Yes, at 8. Okay, today is the last one.
So you've got a minute to switch over.
And eat it later.
Take care, everyone.
Shalom.
Thank you.